said this phrase early on in the clip, and it was, I wrote it down, a dimension deeper than your personal history. That is what Frank and I are trying to describe every single week on this show.
But we constantly fail.
Well, we're trying to describe the indescribable.
Yeah, it's true.
And that's it.
Yeah.
You know, when you begin to practice these concepts and let go and essentially allow yourself to be in this present moment that Eckhart's talking about, it is a different way of experiencing life. And that's what he means when he says a different dimension. And then when he talks about the surface level, it's living in this very, third-dimensional reality of money, bills, pain, suffering, all these types of, day-to-day activities that we struggle and strive, with. And so to hear him talk about this other dimension is probably the best way to explain how you begin to experience life differently. If you don't like the word dimension, use, experience, because what it is you are just experiencing this reality in a different way. It's not like you just get plopped into a different reality and everything changes. No. You experience what's going on in a much fuller, wholer way of being.
Yeah, and he also mentioned the understanding of this stuff being paradoxical. And I've come to realize that there is tremendous power in paradox. And what I mean is when, kind of sitting out what people think is blissed out and just being in the moment, you're just going to be having no experience. Well, that's impossible because that unto itself is an experience. But it doesn't mean you stop playing the everyday game of going to work or whatever it is you're doing. But when you come from that state rather from the ego, because what the ego can only do is tell us what has already happened. So it knows what's happened. So then it's trying to compare this present moment that's heading in my way to what's happening, and it mucks it up. But when I come from a place of present moment, I have no idea. All of a sudden, I'm more prepared to have a more fluid experience in everything, and all of a sudden, that becomes a paradox. So your experiences become largely better or greater in the field. You're more responsive rather than reactive. Because reactive comes as, if I go do this, this is what should happen. I'm like, no, you don't get that call. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, let me do this and see what happens. All of a sudden, when I'm allowing that to happen, I become, and that's the power, I actually come in flow with what's actually happening. I then become in a moment of response rather than moment of reaction. So that's where the power of paradox comes in. When you understand, be completely present, and then head into the world. Head into the world completely alert, completely present, completely calm. And all of a sudden your experience comes amazing. No matter what happens. No matter what happens. Someone throws a punch at you, you're present, you just duck. Or you get hit, I'm like, oh, that was interesting.
No need to get mad.
But we're like, that was not supposed to happen. Sends you flailing, Again, if you're present, the chances are someone punches you unless you're in a boxing ring. Like, you place yourself in these positions when you're not present, by the way. So you don't accidentally walk down a dark alley. Sometimes you're stuck on the phone and distracted. Next thing you know, I'm in a dark alley getting mugged. Yeah. But you have to, if you're conscious, you choose to walk down the dark alley or you don't. And I'm not here to blame victims, but victimization comes from the act of not being present. Correct. Otherwise, you wouldn't find yourself in it. In this present moment, you cannot be a victim.
Well, and that's what Eckhart's getting at in this clip, and why I like this clip so much is he explains we have this weird way of living where we think if we are victimizing ourselves and not enjoying the experience and we're hurting and having pain, then we are justified in our grievances. And this is something I've talked about in the past, and I always like to say, there's no such thing as a justified grievance. And a lot of us, will get up on our soapbox and say, this shouldn't have happened this way. Clearly I had it more difficult because of this, etc. And we have these very, very heavy stories and baggage that we carry with us. But it's how we move from these experiences and how we grow and learn from these experiences that change and flip the script, the entire dynamic of this experience that we call life. And so when we have these justified grievances, they are what's holding us back. it's a moment, and Eckhart talks about this. We almost feel good by feeling bad. We feel good that we're not enjoying this experience. Well, clearly, since I'm not enjoying this experience and I'm suffering so much, it's not my fault. And it's that keeps us trapped. It's, don't you see how much pain I'm in? Don't you see how much I'm suffering? Of course I'm not having a great time. I am justified in these feelings.
Yeah.
And it's like marinating in this sense of lack.
Yeah, he calls that the pain body. So we identify with the pain body. There is a formula where he's talking about when you are in these situations, when you can let go of the pain body, it doesn't mean the memory of whatever happened goes away, but the way you feel about it changes. And when that happens, in the understanding of this formulation, the paradox is it upheaves you into a greater place. It might put you in a place of championing people do that, so this will slow down and stop. Like an Oprah Winfrey's a great example. We use her a lot because she really is, but here was a young woman living in America, happened to be black, and she made it to the top of the ladder. And it's like, it's funny, like when you call it like she was basically in an industry where it was completely dominated by men, let alone a black woman coming in. Yep. And it wasn't like she was competing against anybody. She was doing something that nobody else could have done. But so the time you watch it open, I'm like, oh wow, and then you hear the backstory. When now she's famous enough to tell the backstory. I'm like, wow, I have nothing to bitch about. Mm-hmm. But what she did was, she took her pain body and used it for her good. She would never, ever tell a woman, go out and have this be done to you so you can be where I'm at. Never. She would never excuse what someone did to her. She would never try to make excuse for why it was good. It's not what we're talking about. A lot of people take this out of context when I say it. Like, so you're saying it's good? I'm like, no. I'm not saying that at all.
And that's not what we mean.
No, not at all. It was horrific. But how do I take a horrific thing that has happened, can't do anything about it, and turn it around and become present, and you let go of that pain body? It will catalyst into the most peaceful place you ever been if you come to an understanding. And that's the power in the paradox. And I know, I don't know if we have a clip today of Eckhart talking about, but he has talked about the pain body a lot. And a lot of men and women have it, but you see a lot of women carrying around because of the atrocities that have been going on for years, especially living in this society. It's starting to change, obviously, now. But until they let go of the pain body, very little will change. And again, we're not blaming. It's not what we're talking about, because that's a wrong narrative to come at it, because people are like, oh, you see, you're blaming the victim. Like, not at all. Because the true idea of a victim is that when you're a victim, you're unaware of the situation going around you.
See, that's a very divisive way that our country's gone, too, because we'll take these ideas and, like, in anything now, and we'll say, so that's what you stand for, so everything else is, and it's this divide, it's this separateness that's so, whoa. We went from, being on the same page to now just miles apart. It's that is what we're doing with the egoic mind. Yeah. We're saying you can't you have to be something. I'm going to define you fully, and you can only be that, and there's nothing else. Yeah. And that's a dangerous place.
You know what it is? Because I watch conversations about this all the time. I'll sit there and watch people talk about it, and I'll see like a person talking about information that they know. And they'll go and they'll start to say something, and all of a sudden someone, so what you're saying is it's good? And like, that's not what I'm saying. And what happens is, because we live in a soundbite world, you'll take that person out of context, and all of a sudden they'll be demonized for that. And I'm like, but what's happening right now, which I notice, is people are picking up on it. I'm like, and they're no longer doing it. So people right now in the world that are out in the public eye are very careful to how they speak. I pray that they're not scared to speak, because the truth is we're all on the same side. But it's like it's like if Karen was talking and I only heard part of it. So where we're going for dinner? All of a sudden it's like, it's because I didn't listen. I thought she said something else, but it was my inability to get the full story, why I was lost in it. And sometimes when people don't get the full story, they like to demean. So what you're saying is you hate women? I'm like, no, it's not what I'm like, I love women. Why would you say that? Because somewhere they want to feel the essence of being right and prove something wrong. But when you hear the full narrative of what I'm saying, it's quite the opposite.
I think a lot of it has to do with like, okay, this concept is unknown to me. I need to bring this back to something, harden this into fact. You know, when we allow ourselves to expand, you know, like, okay, that's new to me, that's foreign. I need to redirect this.
Well, when we get stuck in the ego likes to play the game of right or wrong.
Yep.
But when you step out of the ego, there really isn't right or wrong. There's a full story, and when you listen to everybody, so what happens is the media, people like to get you, gotcha.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you really didn't get them because you didn't hear the full story. So now everyone's like, I don't like this person. I'm like, did you ever read him? Why would I read him? I don't like him. I'm like, did you listen to her? No, I don't like her. She's a bitch. I'm like, did you ever read? Why would I do it? She's a bitch. I'm like, how do you know she's a bitch? Mm-hmm. Now, what I do find people out there I do listen to, they come up, they have a point, and they don't really fully make the point. And it's not that the point's wrong. They were just lazy. And I can get that way too. And I get that. And like on the show, that's what me and Mike are trying to do is talk about points and concepts. We don't always get it right, but when I don't, I admit it. But there are people that just aren't really good at what they're talking about, so they don't do justice to the conversation. And then they'll go up against people that do, and even though what the person's talking about might not necessarily empirically be true, but because the way they discuss it with more information and more stuff, like facts is what we call it, they seem to win the argument. I'm like, they might have won the argument, but doesn't mean their point is any more valid than the other person. But the other person was lazy in their, way of discussing it. So all of a sudden now it's like, okay, this whole I gotcha type of situation. How do we look at this good? I'm like, this is the way you look at it, it's good. When I get on the mic and talk about someone, get in front of someone, I have to be very clear in what I say so you can't get me. So I like the person trying to get me. I praise the person trying to get me because I want to make sure you can't get me, because if you can get me, I'm lying, and I'm lying to myself.